Chapter 9 of Walter Bowart's book, Operation Mind Control, The Cryptocracy's Plan to Psychocivilize You, is called The Story of O. And before I proceed, I would like to issue a trigger warning because the details that Bowart gives in the book and the details I will be reading from the autobiography of the woman that I believe he is describing are horrific and very triggering, especially if you have any history of abuse or trauma, especially sexual abuse and trauma. So I would urge you to think about whether or not you want to watch the video, because I will be reading some excerpts directly from Bowart's book and from that autobiography. And the description of both Bowart's book and the autobiography will be listed in the description under this video. Bowart does not disclose O's identity, and he says it is due to the volatile nature of the information contained in her story. However, I believe I know the identity of O because since Bowart wrote his book, information has been revealed by other victims of Project Monarch. And probably the most significant of these is a woman named Cathy O'Brien. Cathy O'Brien has published several mind-boggling books on her experiences with mind control. The first one I read was published in 1995, and it is called Trance-Formation of America. MK Ultra Mind Control Victim Speaks Out. And trance is spelled Trance, as you will see, because hypnosis and the trance state had a great deal to do with the trauma-based mind control that was inflicted on O. The Trance-Formation of America is an autobiography of Cathy O'Brien. It was written in conjunction with the man who freed her and her daughter from mind control. She eventually married this man, and his name was Mark Phillips. Phillips and his background in mind control research and intelligence is a topic for another video, but suffice it to say, Mark, who is now deceased, served as a rescuer and deprogrammer of many MK Ultra survivors. The reason I think Chapter 9 of Bowart's book is about Cathy is because I've read Trance-Formation of America, and in addition, Chapter 11 of Bowart's book is about Project Monarch, specifically. And in Chapter 11, Bowart quotes Mark Phillips and uses him as a source. In the very first paragraph of Chapter 11, Bowart says, Project Monarch, according to Mark Phillips, is a U.S. Defense Department project begun in the 1960s. This sentence contains a footnote which cites Mark Phillips's work, The Top Secret Project Monarch, published in 1994. To get back to the review of Bowart's Chapter 9, The Story of O. Bowart introduces O as a woman born in 1957, whose earliest memories were of repeated childhood sexual abuse by her father, and a mother who not only allowed the abuse to continue, but participated in it. O describes how she developed multiple personality disorder, now called DID, dissociative identity disorder, by the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, Volume 5, as a response to the abuse. The trauma she experienced caused her mind to split and compartmentalize the abuse as a method of trying to cope with the unspeakable horrors she suffered. These included incestuous rape. The compartmentalization allows for the rest of the mind to continue to function normally, as though nothing had happened. It is created by the brain as it shuts down neuron pathways to a specific part of the brain. Then the neuron pathways are triggered open again every time the abuse is repeated. In this way, the brain becomes conditioned to the trauma and continues to deal with it in the same way over and over again. This is how alter personalities are created. The purpose of each is to contain particular aspects of the trauma and to keep the knowledge of it from the core personality, so the core personality can function in society. In this way, it is possible for the core personality to have no knowledge of the abuse or of the other alters. O was unable to recall her father's sexual assaults. Bowart quotes from O's autobiography where she writes that, quote, "As quickly as I felt the terror from conditioned response to his sexual assault, my neuron pathways opened up instantaneously to the part of my brain that had previously endured the trauma. This part of my mind developed into a personality of its own, which belonged to my father, which he rented out and later sold to the U.S. government." End quote. O's father was himself a multi-generational incest victim. His brothers and sisters were also sexually and occult ritually abused and grew up to be drug addicts, prostitutes, and pedophiles themselves. Bowart describes occult ritually abused as in the black rites of Satanism. Bowart compares the case of O to the case of Candy Jones, who was the subject of his Chapter 8. O, however, was able to regain her memory and reintegrate her multiple personalities with the help of Mark Phillips. She remembered being a courier and drug mule, mostly of cocaine, for the CIA, and performing perverted sex acts for a number of leading politicians. According to Bowart, quote, "Those leading politicians included 2 presidents of the United States while they were in office, and 1 before he came to office." Bowart says O's father offered her as a prostitute to his friends, local mobsters, Masons, relatives, Satanists, strangers, and police officers before he entered her into the service of the Cryptocracy. End quote. The ways in which O and her siblings were used by her father and her uncle were despicable. These included being used in child porn films and performing acts of bestiality before the camera. Her uncle was the one that learned of the U.S. Government Defense Intelligence Agency's mind control program to recruit multi-generational incest victims with dissociative identity disorder. Bowart quotes from O's autobiography as she describes the numerous personalities that were created in her mind as part of her trauma. She says that, quote, "I had personalities for pornography, a personality for bestiality, a personality for incest, a personality for withstanding the horrendous psychological abuse of my mother, a personality that witnessed my occult father ritually murdering a man, a personality for prostitution, while the rest of me functioned somewhat normally at school. My normal personality provided a cover for the abuse I was enduring, but best of all, it had hope. Hope that there was somewhere in the world where people did not hurt each other." End quote. Much of the programming was interlaced with childhood fantasy figures such as Cinderella, The Wizard of Oz, and various Disney characters. O describes how her brother to this day remains mired in his traumatic childhood years and is obsessed with Disney memorabilia, though he has no conscious idea as to why. She says that other Project Monarch slaves she met had similar experiences. Her father had many political connections as well as ties to the Catholic Church. She says there are strong political ties between the Catholic Church and the U.S. government. O discusses the various procedures that were used to maintain the state of total mind control in her Project Monarch. These included physical and psychological trauma, sleep, food and water deprivation, high voltage electric shock, and hypnotic and/or harmonic programming of specific memory compartments and personalities. She also describes a sadistic ritual called a most dangerous game, which was originally used to train military personnel in survival and combat methods. In this game, the individual is stripped naked, turned loose in the wilderness to be hunted by men. The wilderness, however, was a fenced-in area, and it was only a matter of time, O says, until she was caught, repeatedly raped, and tortured. The goal of the game is to condition the mind to believe that there is no place to escape. This has the effect of traumatizing the mind at an extremely deep level. O says after all the trauma-based mind control programming she was subjected to, she lost her free will and the ability to reason. Her capacity to resist was broken, and she had no choice but to obey whatever commands were given to her. O names several high-up politicians that she says abused her. These included congressmen and high-up officials in the U.S. military. The stories she tells about what these individuals did to her are shocking. O says that she was sold to one U.S. congressman after she went through adolescence and was deemed no longer suitable for pedophile perversions. If you read Cathy O'Brien's book, Trance-Formation of America, you'll be just shocked to discover who these people were, and she names them. I find it interesting that none of the individuals named have ever sued Cathy over the allegations she makes in her book. Could it be they do not want to undergo the discovery process that is part of the litigation process? One of the most horrific details Bowart shares from O's autobiography is her story about being sexually mutilated. O says the purpose of this was so she could be used as her owner's sexual satisfaction as his own little witch for sadistic sex and covert CIA drug muling, blackmail, and prostitution operations. Silver nitrate and hot X-Acto knives were used to carve out the details of the witch on her vagina without any form of anesthesia. Her vaginal muscles were cut so that when she flexed, they would protrude from her body, showing the hideous witch face. She says it was done because it made her vagina suited to her owner's tiny underdeveloped penis and made her his own little witch. This is a story that, for obvious reasons, is quite difficult to believe. However, before the days of internet censorship, there existed a video of Cathy O'Brien on YouTube being examined by a gynecologist, which showed in graphic detail what the carving looked like. And I saw the video. Of course, when I went back to search for it now, I could no longer find it. But if you go to the site archive.org and type in graphic Cathy O'Brien genital mutilation, you will find the 12-minute long video. If you decide to do this, be prepared. It is one of the most horrendous sights I've ever seen. This is yet another reason I'm convinced that Walter Bowart is talking about Cathy O'Brien in Chapter 9 of his book, Operation Mind Control, although he doesn't name her and refers to her only as O. O also says she was subjected to programming at the Kennedy Space Center in Titusville, Florida, for NASA. She says NASA cooperated with her owner, the congressman, and was hypnotized and photographed and recorded there. Her owner also provided details to a high-up-level Army official at Huntsville, Alabama, and as the two discussed certain perversions he wanted her equipped to perform, they talked about 2 private porn films they were arranging to have produced called How to Divide a Personality and How to Create a Sex Slave. The purpose of the films is to not only document mind control procedures, but to scramble the memory of the victim. Cathy O'Brien, in her book, Trance-Formation of America, relates this story about the How to Create a Sex Slave film. Quote, "The film depicts the common spin programming, which in essence is the combination to unlocking or accessing a specific programmed act. For example, the compartment of the brain that holds memory of incest is stimulated to open when the abuse occurs again. Seeing my father's penis would trigger specific responses, supposedly opening the neuron pathways of my brain to allow the part of my brain that dealt with him before to deal with him again. With spin programming, the trigger is replaced with a combination of specific verbal commands and a specific number of revolutions in turning my body so that anyone with the combination could access that particular part of my brain. The part of my mind originally abused by my father learned to like sex, painful sex. This is but one simplified example of sex programming, and I was programmed for more than sex. But this particular incident of programming at the U.S. Army Redstone Arsenal would change my existence entirely and set the stage for my role in covert government operations as a presidential model." End quote. This is just one horrifying example that Bowart recounts in Chapter 9 about the woman he calls O. I went back and read Cathy O'Brien's book, and I have to say that while it was one of the most horrifying accounts I've ever read, it really opened up my awareness to the whole mind control phenomenon. Cathy names many of her abusers, and the names are shocking. I will not name any of these people in this video, especially since Bowart does not name Cathy as O. But the book is readily available, and if you're interested in knowing more, I encourage you to read it. Trigger warning, however, it is not for the faint of heart. If you have a history of trauma, especially sexual trauma and abuse, the book, along with Bowart's account of it in Chapter 9 of Operation Mind Control, could potentially re-traumatize you. Please exercise caution. Bowart reports at the end of Chapter 9 that O was rescued and deprogrammed by Mark Phillips. He wrote to her and told her of the excerpts he took from her book that he planned to publish in his book, Operation Mind Control. She told Bowart in her correspondence with him this about the process of deprogramming that she experienced with Mark Phillips. Quote, "Mark taught me the ins and outs of my own mind so that I could learn to retrieve my memories myself. I was able to unlock various memory compartments with his knowledge of keys, codes, triggers, and formulas." She said that MPD, multiple personality disorder, now dissociative identity disorder, is the mind's way to protect itself from horrific abuse that it could not handle otherwise. She related that Mark helped her deal with reality and kept her from fragmenting further. He did this by teaching her revivification memory recovery, as opposed to regression and abreaction. So here's a brief explanation of what this means. When a hypnotist hypnotizes someone, he or she must constantly watch for what we call abreaction. An abreaction is an emotional response during hypnosis. The most common emotional response is crying. However, people can also experience laughter and anger. Sometimes, though rarely, therapists encourage their clients to abreact during a hypnotherapy session. We must watch carefully during hypnosis regression sessions with clients who have experienced trauma, especially for abreactions. They can be damaging to the client because they can lead to re-traumatization. Revivification, on the other hand, is a hypnotic technique in which suggestion is used to induce an individual to revive and relive forgotten or inhibited memories in a different way. Revivification means that rather than reliving the events, O was able to watch them on her mind's screen as though they were happening to someone else. When we utilize revivification, the emotional trauma is not felt by the person under hypnosis. From my own personal experience, I know that when conducting past life regressions with people under hypnosis, they sometimes see horrifying events from past lives. It is best to advise the client to revivify the event and view it from a distance in order to avoid the possibility of an abreaction that could be severely re-traumatizing. O told Walter Bowart in her letters that she is now reintegrated and deprogrammed. Mark Phillips passed away in 2017. If you visit Cathy O'Brien's website, which is https://trance-formation.com, you can read the tribute she made to the man who rescued her and her daughter, and who she eventually married. A movie was made of Cathy's story, which can be viewed at https://trance.movie. Cathy has written a more recent book called PTSD, A Time to Heal. This is a workbook that she wrote based on the healing methods taught to her by intelligence insider and her husband, Mark Phillips. The workbook contains the same step-by-step methods Cathy used to heal from Pentagon-level MK Ultra mind control programming. Cathy's story is truly an inspirational one, a story of not only survival, but hope and healing.